So today on the Talentcast, we're doing something different. Yeah, you are in trouble. This is an experiment, semi-live, recorded live in front of a no studio audience, but the internet. So we're going to talk to Tracey Parsons. We're going to see if James speaking to other human beings is a thing that could work. So stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome to the Talentcast, the world's most caffeinated employer brand and recruiting podcast. I'm your host, James Ellis. Thanks so much for listening. If this is your first time for joining in, we do things a little differently. We try and do deep dives. There's not a lot of interviews here. There's not a lot of news here. This is about how do we get smarter and better. And that means how do I get you smarter and better? How do I get you to think about these problems at a deeper level so that you can solve them and look like a genius to your boss? If this isn't the first time you've been here, thanks so much for returning. Feel free to share with your friends, your coworkers, your boss. I don't know. We really do appreciate that. All right, let's get into it. Hey, thanks for sticking around. Yeah, welcome to Talentcast. I'm your host, James Ellis, obviously, because who else would I be? Except for the first time in a very, 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 very long time, 2 years, in fact, I'm joined by a guest. So this is an experiment. We've never done this before. This isn't an interview thing. I really hate interview podcasts. I think they end up kind of doing the same thing. So this is a conversation, for lack of a better word. I wanted to invite some friends of mine over to talk and argue and tell me where I'm full of crap. Maybe give me the opportunity to tell them where I think they might be potentially full of crap, but probably not. So we're just going to try this thing. So I want to introduce to you someone you probably know. If you don't, I don't understand what rock you've been hiding under. It's Tracey Parsons, formerly of Smashfly, now of Parsons Strategic Consulting. She's kind of a genius and kind of great and kind of amazing and kind of someone I dare to call a friend, which is probably presumptuous, and she's not going to disabuse me of that notion on the air, as it were. But later, after we hang up, she'd be like, James, we're not friends. We're not friends at all. So we're going to welcome to the stage, as it were, Tracey Parsons. Say hello.
Hey, everybody. James, I think it's important to note that this is good that it's not on video, because I was doing epic contortions with my face when you were saying all of those things about me. Like, I was just like, what are you talking about? Of course we're friends. Don't be ridiculous. And what do you mean, genius? And I know you asked me on as the first person because I am full of shit. So. Yeah.
And you're a sucker, which is why I love you. So
yeah, that's true.
That's
perfect.
True. This is perfect.
Yeah. Exactly. Let's experiment, man.
We'll get smart people later. You and I will be replaced by actual smart human beings with experience and expertise. We are just the stunt doubles, the test dummies for this process.
Or we'll just get the robots to do it, which is all I've been talking about lately.
Yeah. Oh goodness.
Let's just get the robots going. Fire up those robots, people.
Maybe, you know what? You've just made me think maybe this needs to be a very different conversation. Let's just talk about and complain about robots. Maybe that's a different episode. If you don't know Tracey, Tracey's great. If you haven't seen her speak, you are missing out. She is fantastic. I get to talk a lot, and I love to see her speak. She's just so open and personable and honest and, just telling you what the real shit is, and she's fantastic. So if you get a chance to see her, go see her. If you get a chance to work with her, go work with her. Anyway, let's dive into some actual podcasty type conversations, and that is, like I said, I want to have this conversation, so we're just starting with a prompt, and I'm going to answer the question, and Tracey's going to answer the question, and we're going to argue with each other. But the first one is very simple. Why is it that recruiting in the business, the biz, why don't they get along historically, in practice, on a day-to-day basis? Why don't these two seemingly well-aligned, seemingly in it together, seemingly on the same page organizations never seem to be on the same page?
There's so many answers to this, right? So there's 1,000 reasons, but I was talking to somebody.
I will count.
I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and one of the things that I wanted to address is, why is there a disconnect between HR and TA? Right? And then there's the disconnect between the business and HR and TA, right? So there's layers of disconnect. And I think when you think about hiring managers and TA, I think they're functioning in a completely unique universe. So I was working on a project not too long ago with a healthcare company, and I did focus groups with hiring managers and recruiters, and I asked them to map out their processes. And okay, right? So and then the end of this was overlaying those processes, and they had no idea what one hand was doing and what the other hand was doing, and they all
do you even work in the same company? Is it in the same industry? Have you met?
Yeah.
Do you know each other?
Well, and it was this, and I see this as like an epic blame game, right? So hiring managers blame recruiters for not getting them the talent they need fast enough. Recruiters blame hiring managers and talent. And meanwhile, talent's out there outside the door going, would somebody please look at me?
I submitted my resume weeks ago. Hello, you can't stop complaining. I'm right here.
I'm right here.
Yeah.
I'm right here. And I jumped through all your hoops. And I did all the things that you needed me to do, but they're banging on the window and they're busy inside pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah.
But when I think about like HR and TA, and I was talking to somebody well regarded in this space, and I was like, "What? You have more experience on the HR side. Tell me what's going on there." And she's like, "Well, at the end of the day, HR, there's a good portion of HR that are policy wonks, right? They want to write policy to get this standardization. And first of all, you know what people love? Policy."
Yeah.
Right? That's not a thing.
HR lives and exists purely for the existence and creation of rules and application of rules. That's
right.
what they live for. And my wife is a very rules-driven human being, and how we get along is beyond me most days. But she's very rule-driven. I just see that every time in HR. They just, well, this must be the rule, so let's follow the rule. Let's build the rule.
Right. And let's make it universal for everyone.
Yes,
right.
yes.
So, and let's create this environment that these are the rules that we're all going to abide by, and we're all going to sign these papers, and we're going to sit through those horrifying training sessions. And this is what we're going to do.
And they're all in service of the single goal of how do we not get sued?
Yes!
You can't yell at us because we treated everybody exactly the same poorly. So it just, no business got done. Nothing valuable happened, but at least we didn't get sued. So check the box.
So risk mitigation, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
All about rules, risk mitigation. And then TA is about bringing new people in, right? Yeah. They're about making sure that they're about selling. And I'm not saying recruiting is sales. In some respects, it is.
It is.
And I know that I think I wrote a blog post about that for Social Media Explorer like 6 or 7 years ago, like recruiting is sales. If you get an extra time in your life, you should Google that. But it was this, hey, you guys, you're in sales. So I look at this like I just left a software company, and I love software. I had a software company before I went to Smashfly. I had my own startup, and I understand software. But I look at HR and TA as product and customer success, right? So HR and product are like, okay, we have these business rules. This is what we're going to make. We're going to make this thing, and this is what it's going to do. And these are our policies. These are our risk mitigation. This is our plan. And then sales goes out and sells them whatever the customer needs to hear.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And then sales comes back.
It scratches your back. It slices and dices. It makes perfect julienne fries. It's fantastic. You should buy it.
Yes. Right? And it's not a bag of glass, I swear to God. So
perfect for kids.
Perfect for kids. So
are you selling Bassamatics? Is that where we've gone to?
It's entirely possible.
Fantastic.
I'm selling Bassamatics.
Fantastic.
You can find that on my website. So then they get back together and like, well, why doesn't it do that thing? Right? So and then there's this immediate friction. So again, I think there's friction with within the HR function, within the people function that then manifests itself. And I think the second big reason, and this is something that I think we are going to both completely agree on, is holy smokes, do the C-suite not care about HR because we don't measure anything?
Oh my God.
We don't measure anything.
And the feedback loops are so long. I mean, like, for example, how do you know you hired someone successful? Well,
correct.
If you say they showed up day 2, I think that's a pretty low bar. The real ultimate, my goal, my mind, the ultimate metric of success is we promoted them twice. You can't.
That's a good one. Okay.
That's how you know this person really fits. They really get what you're about. They're working really hard. They're working towards the same things you're working towards. But of course, to do that, you need a crystal ball that can see 2 and 3, 4 years down the future, which obviously is impossible. So the feedback is so poor.
Yeah. Well, and I would am I here?
You're here. You're good.
Okay. I would alter that just a little. I love the idea of hey, if we've promoted you twice, that means that you're a high performer or some semblance of quality.
Perfect hire.
Right? On the flip side, the just funneling of humans into management roles is not a sustainable model.
Fair point.
Right? So maybe we've got people that should be individual contributors for their whole life. We've got to figure out a way to determine if that individual contributor is actually a quality hire. And I'm sure, like, when you look at sales functions or you look at some things that are measured, but that's the thing. Like, we can't seem to figure out how we're going to measure this and translate our measurement to that C-suite to really get that seat at the table.
Yeah.
Because we talk in soft metrics.
Yeah, exactly. Because all the C-suite cares about are 3 things. I've said this many times: making money, saving money, extending the brand to people who actually buy the damn thing. And if you can't talk in one of those three things, shut up. Because everything else is yes, ma'am. It just doesn't connect. These are people who care about sales. They're people who care about revenue. They're people who care about profit, and everything else is in service of those three ideas.
Correct. And we have to start talking like that in TA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
We have to talk about, hey, if we could implement a solution that's going to reduce our time to fill by 10 days, that equals X dollars that the business is saving.
Exactly.
Right. And we have to start thinking about that. And I know you're a big brand guy. I love employer brand. We have to figure out how to measure that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm stunned how many times I talk about this idea of you have to measure it in those three things, and someone in a conference or someone will speak up and say, so how is it possible to know, to your point, how much income is lost when the hire doesn't happen for another week? And I'm like, that is honestly, that is the easiest metric in the world.
Yes.
But it's amazing that recruiting, HR, TA, they just seem to not see it. It's right there in front of them, but they won't see it. So, well, we don't know how much income that person drives. I'm like, screw the income part. Let's just go real simple. Let's just say, if you're going to pay this person $50,000 a year, that means you assume they're at least bringing $50,000 worth of value back to the business. Take $50,000 as your baseline metric. If that person is out of the room for a week, you've lost $1,000. If the hiring manager says, yeah, can we look at a few more people? Yeah, that's going to take 4 more weeks. That's going to cost you $4,000. It's very simple. You don't have to worry about how many sales did we make or how much, what is their actual average revenue per employee. That stuff is overly complicating things, which of course is HR's world, right? But to just focus on, if you're going to pay that person, that's a good baseline of money you left on the table.
And I like that rule for simplicity. Like, this is what the value that they're bringing, obviously. But I'm a big believer in revenue per employee.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, that's the simplest metric. How many people do you get? How many people do you have? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How much money did you guys bring in last year?
Yeah.
Divide.
Yeah, and these are all really simple rules of thumb, but enough to make a good conversation, especially with a hiring manager, especially with the C-suite, to say, if we don't have a good candidate experience, if you don't have a good, strong employer brand, if you don't have a good interview pool process, if you don't have D&I investments, this is what it costs. It's a very simple translation into something that the C-suite goes, oh, I get it. And of course, the value of once the C-suite gets it, the value is the C-suite turns to you and says, well, if you're going to save us $50,000, would you like $40,000 to make that happen? And exactly. I don't think any recruiter's ever had that conversation. Like, no one has ever offered a recruiter 4.5 cents, let alone $40,000.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the miss. And I will also add, like, some of the things that I've been focusing lately on with customers is I'm trying to get people to think a little bit differently about candidate experience. And I am actually using air quotes, despite the fact that I'm on camera.
Yeah.
Everybody has talked about the funnel for the last 5 or 6 years. And I think you and I agree that the funnel is bullshit. There is no funnel.
Yeah, especially since I definitely did my share to popularize or, cement it as a conversation. It's like when I first started at the agency a million years ago, the funnel was like how you got in to say, here's a new way of thinking. And you're 100% right. It's kind of fallen apart in the meantime.
Well, yeah. And one of the things I was talking to somebody recently, like, so if we're talking about candidate experience, we're literally talking about one sliver of this funnel. Mm-hmm. And we also assume that everybody dies after they're hired because that funnel, right? The funnel right now ends at hire. Apparently, once they're hired, they're dead to you.
Dead to
okay?
You.
So one of the conversations I was having last year with a company, I was like, I don't know if you realize this, but if your turnover is X and your average salary is Y, you're letting tens of millions of dollars walk out the door every year.
Yep.
Why are you doing so? I've been trying to talk about not the funnel, but the talent infinity loop. So if we're talking about quote unquote candidate experience, we really need to talk about talent experience. What is the life cycle of that employee? So when you and I are talking about, okay, how long does this role sit open and how much money can we save? How many people exit the organization 60 days post-review period? Your reviews are broken.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm trying to look at these experiences and try and find the pits and the peaks for my customers and take the pits and turn them into peaks.
Yeah.
Because, first day of work, you show up and somebody might be there and you might get a computer right? And we're running into this all the time. Like, we've all had this experience.
Yeah, there's no shortage of data that says onboarding is crucial for long-term success.
Right. And then there's the review cycles, right? And all of these things contribute to TA being able to be successful, because the more people that exit your organization, the more recs you have.
Yeah. You got to plug up the funnel, plug up the leaks before you can fill the top of the bucket.
Correct. And let's not assume they die after hire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to a client and I asked them, what happens when someone quits? And they were all said the same thing. It's like these, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. I'm like, well, how in the heck are you going to get 1, a good Glassdoor review, 2, referrals after the fact, and 3, let's be fair, boomerangs are real. Boomerangs are not a myth. I'm seeing them everywhere. They're never coming back to you, and you have effectively burnt off a source of referrals and like positive engagement and let alone hires. I mean, direct hires. And just because it behooves your ego's bruised that someone would deign to leave you.
Yeah, it's real. And sometimes I think it's that the humans are where all of us humans are getting in the way of actual progress in this space.
That's a good way to put it. That is a really good way to put it.
Right? Because I think I blogged about this yesterday. I was riffing on the thank you note lady. And I was like, okay, so let's think about this for a second. And we're talking about experiences, and we're absolutely asking candidates to do 5,000 things more than we're actually doing for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't, I think one of my notes was like, and by the way, I've written probably 10,000 thank you notes. That's hyperbole, but I've written a lot.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I just interview for practice. It's just fun.
Yeah.
So, I've written all these thank you notes, and gosh, not once did anybody write me a thank you note.
Nope, not once.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and we put them through all these hoops. We put them through all this nightmare, and we don't give them anything out of it.
It's 1997, isn't it? Don't we as the hiring entity have all the power, and they should be begging us for a job? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's why podcasts are working so well. It's 1997.
Right. And you know what I say to all that nonsense? You keep going with that nonsense, but do not ever ask me where the good people are.
Yeah.
You've simply alienated them. They're all out there. They're just done with you.
Yeah, and that's for every recruiter who says, I can't find good talent, and the answer is, no, let me translate that for you. The good talent doesn't want to talk to you. And there's a million reasons why, and some of them are your fault. Some of them aren't, but some of them are absolutely your fault.
Well, and let's think about that. So I don't know about you, but I've had instances in my career where I've had an incredible candidate and hire experience. Incredible. They've done everything. They've done everything right. They sent me, they sent me a thank you email, like all the people I met with did that. Like I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And I get there, and you know when you work in the world that we work in, you are scrutinizing everybody that you talk to, right? Like I am digging in. Yep. I want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly about this organization before I join it. And this happened to me once. Perfect hiring process. So excited. Get there. Leave 9 months later. Ooh. Because I have buyer's remorse. It's not what they sold me. And one of the challenges that we have is that we're consistently doing that. We're creating a decent experience. We're putting out a brand that is, if it's differentiated, congratulations, because everything I'm reading right now reads employer bland.
Yeah.
But then we get there and it's not what you sold them. It's that product and sales kind of thing.
Yeah, you've over-optimized on that one muscle. So it's like if you decide, I'm going to work up just my bicep, and you're like, look at all, I can curl 200 pounds. Like, that's amazing. But you can't pick up a 20-pound weight because your back isn't strong enough to bear the weight of everything else. It's like if you just focused on that one muscle and you've made it amazing, but it doesn't stand up for the rest of the weight. So people walk up going, you've over-optimized for candidate experience. You've over-optimized for selling that opportunity. But when you show up, it's lies. And you're right, that painful, that to think all the energy and resources and thought process that it went into how do we make this an amazing sales process, like just put half of that into the actual employee experience.
And then I want to leave 9 months later, but I'm nervous because now I'm a job hopper. Right? So we trap these people for 2 years of their lives in a bad experience. And they're not going to say anything nice about you. So there's this realism that has to start happening if we're going to make any dent here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, look at the data that says if you change jobs every 2 years, you inherently have like a 10 or 20% higher salary than if you stick around. Do not tell me that it's those millennials or those Generation X or those whatevers who are job hoppers. It's like you've incentivized them to leave. You've made it so that the game is clear. It's like playing Monopoly and say, well, how dare you pick up $200 every time you pass go? It's like, it's right there. You've made it very clear. That's how I make my money. Give me a break. So far, so good? Fantastic. But if you can't get enough of this stuff, I have some news. You can bring the James Ellis experience to your event or company. Just go to jamesellis.us and learn about all the kinds of custom presentations I can build and deliver for you or your team. But if it's time to get some hands-on help with your employer branding, recruiting, and hiring, either from the ground up or some strategic support, I would love to help. Just reach out to Proactive Talent or proactivetalent.com. That's where I work, and we can help you hire better. Cool? Cool. All right, let's get back to it.
Right. And it doesn't make any sense to me. So like I think that there's the whole measurement piece. Mm-hmm. I think that there's an epic amount of imbalance between in the HR suite, right? They're not talking to each other. Mm-hmm. Like just to the story we were talking about a second ago, I was sold something that's not really culturally true. Mm-hmm. Right? And so those things aren't married. The employee experience and the candidate experience aren't married, which is why I've been talking about talent experiences. Those groups need to be sitting in a room together, mapping this stuff out so that it's true and real. And do you know what ends up happening? People stay. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. I mean, and when people stay, you have fewer recs to fill all the time. Right? Because based on the number of jobs I see posted, every company in the world is experiencing 75% year-on-year growth.
That's amazing.
Isn't it?
Except all they're doing is shuffling the deck every 20 minutes. Like, you get this card and I'll take your card. It's like we're poaching. All we're doing is poaching from each other.
Well, and that's what I've been talking about to a lot of different people is I was looking at this cell phones, right? So I love my iPhone. It's my favorite. Okay. And I hate switching phones. Okay, I just do. Okay. I hate switching banks. I don't like switching. Period. Yeah. I'm a creature of habit. Definitely, I like my things the way I like my things. But so cell phones I was reading not too long ago, are starting to decline in production. Like they're down in production. They're producing fewer cell phones because people are buying. So there's market penetration like never before.
Yeah, it's like 97% or something insane.
Exactly. So what everybody has been focusing on in that space is two different strategies to get new and retain. Mm-hmm. And the cell phone industry has amazing switcher strategies. Like, how are we going to get somebody to switch from Android to iPhone? Mm-hmm. And then they have great upgrade strategy, right? How are we going to get this new phone to be sexier to the person that we want to upgrade?
A clear path to stay, a clear path inwards.
Correct. Why does TA only have switcher strategy? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me. And we have no upgrade strategy.
Yeah, you look at the data that says the company would much rather hire and pay the premium, a $10,000, $20,000 salary premium for an outside expert than it would be to promote someone from within or someone who has that skills. But you're so used to them and you just see them as a individual contributor. You see them not as an expert, as a junior level.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, if you took that 10 or 20%, took a tenth of it, handed it to that employee and said, it's development budget, go get good, you'd save so much money. But it's so easier just to go get the it's all shiny object syndrome.
Well, and it's not even easy anymore to go get new.
That's also true.
Right. So we've reached market penetration on jobs at this point in time. There aren't as many. Right. So it's time for us to start thinking about upgrade strategy and how we're going to get people to upgrade their career within your walls.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole, again, humans getting in the way of everything. But then you're going to make me have that person that I think is a star on my team. I mean, you're going to promote them to somewhere else and they're not going to cover my butt because they're not going to be my star. Right. So I'm like, you have to stop doing that.
Yeah. The friction internal to a company is insane.
It's is.
And that happens because the hire manager who's letting someone go doesn't trust recruiting to go find a body and put it in place that's at least as good as the person letting go in a timely manner. If they felt like there was a level of trust that says, look, if I let Susan go to become amazing rock star at some other team, you're going to bring me the Susan 2.0. This is an opportunity to upgrade my talent, not sitting twiddling my thumbs for 3 months waiting for you to bring me someone plausible, feasible, good enough. And that's a function. That's the friction of lack of trust.
And look, we got back to full circle, the original question.
Indeed.
I know. How about that? Well played.
I was on Blind, which is my favorite train wreck to watch.
Okay, what in the heck is Blind?
Really? No.
Seriously?
Okay, so it's an app. Think of it as Glassdoor, but completely and truly anonymized. Oh. And though I would say it is definitely leaning towards the tech community in the obvious tech community, geographics. But it's a lot of, if you want to see a 26-year-old complain that they're only getting $160,000 a year instead of $165,000 a year, have I got an app for you. It is just epic, the things these people will complain about. But every once in a while, you just see these nuggets of gold. And I can't tell you what company it was, but I said, someone effectively says, I don't know what company our employer brand team works at, but I want to work there.
Oh, man.
And I was like,
I
guess
ouch.
Kudos to the employer brand team, and maybe you have some issues to deal with. Maybe there's some bigger problems here. Maybe you've overpolished that particular turd.
Okay, you want to hear something funny? I've been on a couple of projects this year, and part of those projects is interviewing silver medalists. No, it's beautiful. Really? I absolutely love this work. It's so entertaining.
Do tell.
And just kind of talking them through their candidate experience. And I think I've talked to about 40 silver medalists in the last 2 or 3 months. So, a couple of insights. One, none of them remember the application being difficult.
Interesting.
Okay.
So stop solving the wrong problem.
Well, keep solving that problem, because when I dug into it, it was always, I've had worse. So we've essentially trained people to be tortured.
Stick you're poking me in the eye. You've blunted it. It's not bad. It's not too bad.
It's less sharp than the last stick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that was one of them. So we've essentially trained people to endure almost anything that we throw at them for this opportunity, and they don't care. Although we did a mass survey as well. One of the survey respondents said, if you wanted to humiliate and dehumanize people, you would simply make them apply to jobs over and over again and never hear back. I was like, girl, yow.
Okay, but that begs the question.
Yeah.
Should we be investing in a quote unquote better application process
Yes.
if, one, the audience doesn't mind that it's a stick, just as long as it's not too sharp, and two, would they really notice a difference because the bar is so low?
So that's a really great question, and something that I dug into a little bit more in those interviews.
And we didn't even practice this.
No, I know. Thanks for feeding me that softball. So that was funny, because I was like, well, how would you feel? First, and I asked him, I was like, how would you feel if there was no application? Mm-hmm. Okay. About 60% of the people said that would feel really shady.
Yeah, I bet they went, could you repeat that question? There's no way you could have just asked what I think you just asked me.
Right, and they would always follow it up, well, what do you mean? Like, how would that work, right? And I was like, I explained to them, well, what if you just simply put in your email address and your name and your mobile phone, and the internet went and grabbed all of your social profile about you, so that they could do some aggregation of all of the footprint that you have out there to determine your background and skills. And they were like, that would feel awkward. I was like, okay, well, what if it was...
lack of control freaks people
Absolutely.
out. Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, what if it was simply just upload a resume and it's over? Mm-hmm. And somebody said, you know what? There are 2 or 3 companies that I applied to in the last 2 years that's all it was. And I wanted to work for them more.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So if you give them something simpler, they will remember that, right? So we're not creating a memory by giving them the status quo.
Yeah.
If we can create a memory of giving them something that was simple and easy and engaging, then they're going to remember that, right? So I do think that this is a problem that we need to continue to solve.
So I want to inject something right there. Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking of I don't know, you're in Ohio, so I don't think there's a Uniqlo there, but for those of you in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and I think 1 or 2 other places, Uniqlo is effectively like the Japanese Gap. And when you give them your credit card to pay for whatever socks and shirts you're buying, they take your credit card with 2 hands and they treat the credit card with respect. Now, people who are Japanophiles, they go, yeah, that's pretty standard in Japan. Yeah. And you'd say, yeah, I'm in Chicago. That is not standard at all. But it's a stupid gesture to say, I am treating this payment transaction process with some measure of respect where it's not just someone grabbing your card, swiping it through like it's a piece of junk, and then flinging it back at you. Tiny little things like that make huge, huge, impressionable differences.
Yes. I mean, they really do. I'm reading this book right now called The Power of Moments. And it's all about creating experience. And it's a really good book. So if you guys are listening to this, go check it out of your library or pick it up on Amazon. It's a standout book. But I'm reading this book, and it's talking about a hotel that I stayed at once. And I remember the hotel vividly as a great experience. And it was not like the fanciest hotel I've ever stayed in. It actually reminded me of staying at Melrose Place. Like it had that, not kidding you. So it was like these apartments and whatever.
Everybody was sleeping with everybody. Yeah.
It was
there
crazy.
There were camera crews around. Someone tried to kill someone.
And there was
fantastic.
There was this random pool in the middle of the courtyard. Like the whole thing was kitschy. But they did things like they had a snack menu in your room. They had snack menu, movie menu, and you would just literally call down to the front desk and say, okay, well, I would like a bag of M&Ms and some Twizzlers and some microwave popcorn and there's these two movies. And they would, no charge, just bring it up to your room.
Nice.
But then the thing that I missed and made me mad that I read about in the book, apparently there's a red phone by the pool.
Okay.
When you pick up the red phone, they answer popsicle hotline. What flavor would you like?
Oh my goodness.
And they bring out white glove, silver tray popsicles out to the pool. So that element of surprise and delight, we've got to figure out a way to put some element of surprise and delight, not just in the application process, but in the discovery process, in the onboarding process, in the review process.
And the bar is so low. Anything that is just interesting or different is something that's memorable.
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't even good popsicles that you were getting, but the fact that there was a stupid red phone they paid for once, and someone who knows that when line 444 rings, you just say popsicle hotline. That's all it takes. It doesn't take a staff of 5. It doesn't take, budget line item. It's not a capital campaign. It's just, gosh, what would I find amusing? Boom.
Right. And think about this too. There's a level of training, right? So if we spent a little bit more time developing training that was engaging, because training today, not so much.
Yeah.
But like, what if you were training your managers on how to give a great review? What if you were training people on how to onboard people with elegance? Like, what if everybody in the office had to take mandatory onboarding training? And you knew on day one that you were going to go visit the new hire and say hello at 10:45. Right? And you have to train people. You have to, if you're going to develop that experience of the red popsicle hotline, everybody has to be on board with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it can't just be a side thing. It can't be Bob's goofy idea that Bob decides to man because Bob finds it funny.
Right.
Interesting.
Now, one of the other things, though, I was talking about this application process with all these silver medalists. The other thing I was talking about was review sites.
Okay.
And I'm asking them, okay, so, do you visit review sites? And I didn't single anybody out, right? I was just, because there's a lot of choices. And I was like, do you visit these sites? And they all, pretty much all, I would say 80+%. I visit it, but I simply visit it for salary. I'm like, do you read the reviews? And they said no. And I asked them why. I'm like, what would people are putting this information out there for you to get a better sense. Like I find these tools incredibly valuable because I want to know the good, bad, and the ugly. But the general job seeking population thinks that it's either somebody highly disgruntled or somebody that's been compensated or encouraged to write something nice. So they said if they read anything, so the people that read them, they said they read the 3s.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's interesting. And I was like, so do you have a point of view, like when you're reading the 3s, is it better if the brand responds, like if the company responds? And they're like, oh yeah, but it's still the canned response.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot going on there. There's a lot to unpack in all these interviews because you and I are so close to this whole thing that we every now and then forget to go, oh wait, their experiences look, apply, hire.
Yeah. Now, I'll say that I think there's an opportunity, even if they're quote unquote not reading, or if they're picking what selected readings, or if the responses are canned, there are ways of using those touch points. I mean, just like I didn't have to put the phone out by the pool, but I decided to create a touch point.
Correct.
You can use every single touch point to increase or to direct attention or to direct an idea. It's just that if you decide to do lowest common denominator, canned answers, baseline things, you're going to get baseline people back. And it's the company who says, I'm willing to say, no, this is what we're really all about, and this is what we care about. And it may not be obvious on first glance, but you start to a candidate absorbs that idea. And in the same way, like if you go on a date and somebody's giving you the heebie-jeebies, you can't always put your finger on why that guy or girl is, that's no good. I'm not good. But at the same time, the person you fall in love with, can you point to the same thing? No, of course not. It's a set of inferences and ideas and, patterns that are repeated, and it's just so many different things, and none of them that you can say, because we put the red phone by the pool. And by the way, I'm stealing the concept of a red pool by the phone as being like the show that jumped the shark. This is the thing, the goofy, crazy thing that you could be doing to spark joy, that is the easiest thing in the world that you've chosen not to do. So that's the big metaphor for the entire industry now.
Right. And just make sure that we credit the Heath brothers for their research on this one.
Fair enough.
Because this is directly from their book. And I'm loving the book. It's really powerful. But yeah, the red phone. Why aren't we doing more red phones?
Yeah. That honestly, I think that has to be the metaphor. It has to be. So coming from Groupon, this is a company that effectively its DNA was goofy. It was super well known in its day for really interesting copywriting. They were literally sales emails that you were interested to read. They were well written. They were engaging, and they had a big space cat in the foyer, the Chicago office, and literally it's like 7 or 8 feet wide. It's massive. And some goofy sculpture. But over time, as the company started to get more set in its ways and become more, dare I say, HRified, that it became process and let's avoid the lawyers, let's avoid legal, let's keep it simple. The fun went away. But you'd see these traces, it was like a big appendix sitting out in the lobby of, this is how fun we used to be. We used to have a space cat that was just a thing, and literally now you can't. If you Google space cat Groupon, it's hard to find stuff.
Yeah,
it's literally been that kind of depreciated inside their own sense of why they work there. And it's interesting to say, no one got paid to say, what if we had a big space cat? Someone said, it'd be goofy. Let's make a space cat. And it turned out that it sparked joy in somebody, and that's what they wanted their brand to be, and that was great. But keeping that going is hard to do.
Yeah, that is the thing, right? So I remember talking to Lynn Bailey at Intel a couple years ago, and she and I were just riffing on the fact that everybody thinks that all of the things that we're doing in talent experience, recruitment marketing, and employer brand it's never done.
Yeah.
Right? And culture, like culture work, employee experience. This is never done. This is a garden. And if you don't water that garden, you're going to get weeds.
Yeah.
You are going to get dead flowers, and nobody wants that. But you have to continue to tend to that garden all the time. Right? And you have to be taking its temperature. You have to be measuring the health of your garden at any given time.
Yeah.
But sometimes we get in there and we get really excited about the brand launch, and then we're all going to sit back and take a couple weeks to take a deep breath and maybe debrief about it, or maybe not.
Who takes a couple weeks to do anything?
Well, I've seen this happen. Like I've seen people like, okay, we launched.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when they hand the employer brand to a part-time recruiter. And it's like, okay, 20% of your time is also employer brand. Well, they do it, and then they have to go back to their quote-unquote day job of recruiting and sourcing. It's like, no wonder that thing isn't going to stick.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right? There's nobody tending the garden.
No.
And even I've even seen people with professional employer brand teams, not just a person, but teams who are then on to the next thing. And the next thing may have nothing to do with the brand. And I look at their plans, I look at what they're doing, I look at this and I'm like, where's optimization on your plan?
Yeah. Where's the feedback loop?
Right. Are you ever studying to see what's resonating? And I've spent too many years in consumer and recruitment marketing to know, like, this all has to be done in a lean methodology. Like, we have to learn, measure, build all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget to learn and to measure. We
Yeah.
just start building.
I mean, honestly, even and learning and measuring is incredibly valuable, but I also think that there is no such thing as a campaign that should be a standalone. Everything should build on itself, should
Yes.
connect the dots. It should, take a piece of content from this project and take a story from that project. They should come together and glue together to form a brand new idea, or at least become the raw materials for the next thing. You're always just making these bricks and saying, okay, what is the house I want to build today?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tactics, not a lot of strategy.
Totally true. Totally true.
I saw this. It might have been Convince and Convert. It was a social social marketing blog that I follow pretty religiously. And
It's Jay Bear, right?
Yeah, I think it's Jay.
Yeah.
But it might have been. I think it was research from Buffer that they published on Convince and Convert, and it said 50% of organizations using social actively today have no strategy.
No.
That's consumer marketing. So what do you think it's like in recruitment marketing?
As someone who used to sell social media services to recruiting teams, he says, yeah, I'm just bracketing that whole statement. Yeah, the goal was to get companies to agree to X number of tweets a week. It wasn't about what should the tweet do. It wasn't about what the outcome should be. It was all about how do we fill calendars and how do we set cadence. Who cares? Yeah. Who cares? That doesn't drive value.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. You have to and it was funny because, going back to my own business, I was like, oh God, I've got to write my own marketing strategy. There was this whole cobbler's children has no shoes moment a couple weeks ago. I was like, okay, well, what are my content pillars and what are my channels? And I was like, oh man, this is painful. I must have done 3 laps around my desk every 5 minutes. I was like, ooh, stretching my arms, I don't even know what I'm saying. Okay, it's time to go for a walk.
Kinetic learner.
Yeah.
Kinesthetic learner.
I was just like, man, this is harder than it looks. But this is something that I do for people all the time, but doing it for yourself is really challenging, which is why I've seen this pendulum swing on all sides of marketing, whether it's recruiting or consumer or B2B. We go through this pendulum swing of over-reliance on agency to over-reliance on internal. Mm-hmm. And that moment when we're kind of in the middle is where it's really good, right? Yeah. So best too much agency, you don't get enough of the brand influence. Mm-hmm. Too much brand, you don't get enough of the outsider influence. Yeah. But you got to hit that sweet spot. So we kind of need each other. There's this great symbiosis in the world where you have to have that outside perspective. You have to have that candidate perspective to really define and design what it is that you're going to be bringing to the table that's going to be meaningful. Yeah. And so many times I see, we're going to do all these focus groups in our own company. I was like, are you going to talk to the people outside your company? I mean, we don't even know where to start with that. I was like, well, I do.
Funny
you need to
ask.
do that. But that's a thing. If you do, you're going to it's just this beautiful effort, navel gazing, right? Yeah. So we can't. The external voice has to be infused. Yeah. That perception of who you are.
The David C. Baker, who writes and has a couple books that are amazing and a podcast I love, Two Bobs. He says it's impossible to read the label from the inside of the jar. If you really want to understand what this company is all about, you have to have some sort of outside perspective. And I'm stealing it and I'm using it. So there you go.
That's brilliant.
There you go. All right, Tracey, we have. I think we had 1 or 2 smart moments. I think it was 41 minutes of us just being goofy. But I'm hoping somebody got something out of this. I had a blast, as I always do with you. For those of you who want to learn more about Tracey, she is at tparsons on Twitter. She's also parsonssc.com. She is easily findable on the web if you literally just type Tracey Parsons. For whatever reason, a fairly simple, straightforward name you prop right up. There's a million James Ellises, so I wish I could say the same thing. So I'm jealous of your SEO ability. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I had nothing to do with it.
Exactly. We'll thank your parents for that one. I guess. I mean,
no. If you could also Google my maiden name, which is Hubiak.
You gave that up? Oh my goodness, that's amazingly SEOable. All right.
Oh yeah, no. Tracey Parsons is a lot easier, but now I don't know who's calling me as a phone solicitor.
That's fair. Yeah.
Tracey,
thanks so much for being here,
Thank
for
you, James.
experimenting with me on this very first time of doing just a goofy chat like this. So I had a blast. I hope everybody listened had a blast too. If you enjoy the podcast, keep listening, tell a friend, do the review dance on iTunes and Play and all those other places. Go give Tracey the business. And I'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Well, the music means you've made it to the end of another episode of the Talent Cast. If this was useful to you, do not keep it a secret. Share it with your team. Share it with your boss. Share it with your networks. I don't know. Share it with your mom. If you have questions you'd like me to answer on a future show, or just, general ideas about how to make this thing better, just ping me on Twitter. I'm at The War for Talent, at The War for Talent. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
The world's best-known investor and Wall Street expert Warren Buffett once said, "Wall Street is the only place that people ride to in a Rolls-Royce to get advice from those who take the subway." Mr. Buffett's quote is remarkably accurate, but how many people would rather receive advice from him than someone simply guessing? Welcome to Buy, Hold, Sell, your single source for Wall Street knowledge and profitable guidance. Please join me, Todd Schoenberger, and fellow trader Tobin Smith, as well as host Veronica Dudo, for a podcast known to move the needle for investors. Tobin and I are seasoned Wall Street executives with deep investment experience, and we are prepared to share our advice to those who choose to listen. Download Buy, Hold, Sell today on the Evergreen Podcast Network or your favorite podcast channel.